Hi, this is Nahi Kazaza, and I'd like to welcome you to our Quick and Easy Resume and Cover Letter series. This is our third video in a series of 5. In our first video, we did an overview of our Aspire resume template, and we also talked a little bit about the different formats you can use and why some formats are more effective than others. And in our second video, we went through the first 3 sections of our template here: the heading, the objective, and the summary of skills. In this video, we're going to dive deeply into work history. Well, as you can imagine, with work history being the most important part of your resume and the most meaty, this is going to take a little bit longer, and there are a couple concepts that I want to make sure that you're really clear on before we actually get to writing it. The first thing that's really important is that I like to have all my clients create a work history worksheet. Essentially what that is a document that has all the information that you can possibly think about related to your work experience in one place. And then you're not going to have a lot of room on your resume to put everything. And plus, if you put everything, it would make your resume too hard to read. So you'll be picking and choosing the best bullets to put into your work history from your work history worksheet. But to make it easy, you want to have everything contained somewhere. So typically, I'm using Word as my word processor. It can be any word processor. But if you're doing your resume in Word, you want to have a second Word document that you keep in the same general area as your resume versions. That's your work history worksheet. In your work history worksheet, you want to put every company you've ever worked for, every job you've ever done, get all your dates, and include volunteer work. It doesn't matter that you got paid to do a job when it comes to work experience. Your experience is your experience. If you got paid for it, it has nothing to do with whether or not you learned something or got really good at something. So think about, especially if you're coming back into the workforce after a long period of time parenting, or if you had a couple of years off to travel, or if you are changing jobs, careers, you're going to be wanting to pick from all different areas of work experience, maybe not just your last job. Don't worry about what you got paid. Don't even worry about whether something was part-time or just on a project basis. You want to list every little thing that you can think of that gave you experience. So parenting activities, work at church, medical or legal issues that you had to figure out for your family. Maybe you were power of attorney for something. That's a lot of learning. Events you planned and ran. Let's say you had to put together a big family get-together or a wedding. Maybe you did fundraising for a school and you organized events there for your children. Projects or hobbies that enabled you to learn skills, situations you handled that developed your people skills. Maybe you got into some really tough conflicts within your neighborhood and you were able to resolve them. I mean, that's really important experience. So don't worry about questioning whether or not I'll actually put this into my resume or not. That's why this is a separate document. It's called your worksheet. There are many things that you'll put on this worksheet that you'll never put on your resume, but you want to make sure that you have a nice long document that has lots of content so you feel abundant, that you have a lot to choose from to put into your resume. It takes the stress out of running your resume and thinking, oh my gosh, I don't know what to write. So the work history worksheet is something that we put together first. The other concept that I think is extremely important for you to understand before we get started is this thing called responsibility statements versus accomplishment statements. What do I mean by responsibility statements and accomplishment statements? These are the various ways that people describe their work experience on their resume. They use bullets. They write a sentence on the bullet. We'll call that a statement. The statement historically tells what you are responsible for. But more recently, it can give an example of something you accomplished. And what we're finding is there's a big difference on how those different kinds of statements read, which can make a huge difference in how your resume reads and a huge difference on the impact your resume has on the person who's reading it. So I want to give you a couple of examples first, just so that you can get a feel for the difference between a responsibility statement and an accomplishment statement. This is a responsibility statement. I was responsible for managing 5 designers. This is that same statement, but maybe tweaked a little bit into an accomplishment statement. I guided the design team to exceed aesthetic and performance standards. Notice that in the responsibility statement, it just says what you were responsible for. It actually doesn't say anything about how well you did the job. How well did you handle your responsibility? It just says this was the job that I was assigned to. This is what I was supposed to be doing. The accomplishment statement, what it does not do is tell them everything you were responsible for. What instead it does is pick out something you did as an example. For example, I guided the design team to exceed aesthetic and performance standard. That's one thing I did while I was responsible for managing the 5 designers. There may be many other things that I did. I probably reviewed them. But what we're learning is that it's not necessary for you to write on your resume everything that you did, everything that you were responsible for. What tends to be more compelling is picking out 3 or 4 examples. Those examples illustrate the type of person you are, the kinds of results you get, the types of accomplishments that you tend to have when you're on the job. And what people tend to do is extrapolate from that. Everybody does this. They jump to conclusions based on a few bits of information. So people will be looking at the few bullets on your resume and jumping to some initial conclusions anyway about who you are and what you do. What you get to do by creating accomplishment statements is choose 3 or 4 examples of when you were at your best and allow them to extrapolate from that. So you're kind of controlling something that's going to happen anytime, or at least influencing it. Here's another comparison. Responsible for patient monitoring and medication and reporting to doctors. Or monitored patient medication dosage and response, reporting to doctors so that they could make needed adjustments and provide the best care possible. Managed sales in the Western region. Grew revenue in the Western region by 25% over 3 years. Notice the difference in how you feel when you hear me say the responsibility statement versus the accomplishment statement. What we find that in general, responsibility statements passively report your job duties, while accomplishment statements report examples of actions you took. They happen to be more interesting to read. They bring you to life. They use a lot of verbs, so there's a lot of action expressed, and it's more exciting to read. They actually show your value. They show your competence, and they establish evidence that you're getting results. They tell what you actually did well rather than what you were supposed to be doing, with no information on whether or not you actually did well at it. So one of the things that we want to do on your work experience worksheet is get you some material so that you can write some great accomplishment statements that you can use on your resume. And the way we do this is we have you write a list of proudest moments. So what I tell my clients to do is for every job or everything you listed on your list of work experience, try to think of a few things you were proud of. Now, if you were at one job for 10 years, you're probably going to have to write a lot of things you were proud of. But if you were at one job for 6 months, you might only come up with one thing you were proud of. In general, for each job on your resume, you'll come up with about 3 bullets, just to give you some context. But on your work experience worksheet, you'll want more than 3 bullets because you'll want to have the luxury of choosing. So what I'd like you to do is spend some time on your work experience worksheet. The more time you spend on it creating proudest moments and going through this process that we have right here, listing proudest moments, creating what we call power stories, and I'm going to explain what that is in a moment, come up with a few examples for every single job, and then practice writing accomplishment sentences. This is the work that you'll do that is going to create an absolutely outstanding resume. The format of an accomplishment statement is pretty simple. It's either I did X resulting in Y, or I achieved Y by doing X. So essentially you're saying what you did and what the result was. So how do you get there? First, we write a list of proudest moments. So I'm going to just kind of go through that process with you. So I'm sitting here thinking about a job I had, and I'm thinking about when are the moments I was proud. The thing to keep in mind here is that the moments that you were proud, you were likely using your best skills and strengths. So these are the moments that we want to highlight. So for example, the time I handled a difficult client who disrupted a presentation I was doing in front of our CEO and CFO, no less. This is one of my proudest moments, and I used it for my resume. And you also get to use these, by the way, as your interview stories. So this is great preparation for interviews. And I'll always remember it. It was a moment where I was in a crazy situation. I was very visible. People were watching me, and I handled it really, really well, and I was always proud of myself. The time I was able to pull people from several departments together to get a project done in 2 weeks that would normally take 4 months. That was another one of my real ones that I was extremely proud of, that we got something done in such a short period of time. It was great energy. The time I figured out how to create a spreadsheet to help us monitor our expenses more efficiently. Can you imagine that figuring out moment, how you might feel really proud about that? So think about things that you figured out at any of your jobs. Those are great examples of proudest moments. When I raised $5,000 for my breast cancer walk. When I sold our principal on the idea of supporting a field trip to 3 diverse religious organizations so we can teach similarities and differences in perspective. So this is something a parent might do, or someone who's not working might do, that still counts as a pretty big accomplishment. Choosing the perfect colors to represent our brand and being able to explain to our VP why these colors lined up with the message we want to convey. So this is what I want you to do. And for most of my clients, I ask them to try to come up with at least 20 or 30 total proudest moments. Because when I work with my clients, you use them on your resume, some of them, but you're also going to be using them to prepare for job interviews. And you want to have enough proudest moments to be the basis of your answers to interview questions. So think about how many interview questions you might be asked. That's why I say come up with 30 proudest moments, because you'll have a lot of content right there at your fingertips to use as answers to interview questions. So interviews in a different section of the website, but just so you know, this work that you're doing now to prepare for your resume is actually also going to help in your interview preparation. Okay, so now once you have your list of proudest moments, what are you going to do with them? Well, what we have is called PAR. Notice I have problem or goal, actions, and result. Some people call it STAR, which is situation or task, action, result. It doesn't matter if it's PAR or STAR. Essentially what you're looking for is something that gives you context of a situation, and then what is it that you did and what's the result that you got. So I'm going to elaborate on a couple of my proudest moments. So I'll take that first one where I was in that crazy situation. I was giving a prepared presentation for visiting clients when one participant interrupted me, claiming that what we were presenting didn't have any merit at all. So they were basically calling us on the carpet and trying to say that what I was saying in my presentation was completely untrue. And my CEO and CFO were in the room watching. And that was pretty nerve-wracking because it was going to take me completely off topic to address this question. So I had to make a decision. I listened to the client and chose to go off topic and address his question, even though it required improvisation and thinking of a good example. But I did it, and the reason I did it was because I felt like if I ignored his question, then it would just be standing in the air for everyone in the room. It was really critical that I build our company's credibility. So writing how I made that decision and then what I actually did is really important. You may not always write how you made a decision, but sometimes that could be relevant. And then my result was that the client was impressed, that I knew exactly what I was talking about and could address his issue, and this reestablished our credibility because what he was claiming was in fact untrue. And it established credibility not only with this client, but with the entire audience. So what I'm doing is I'm taking a moment that I was proud and I'm putting it in PAR format. Now, I'm not going to write all of this on my resume in one sentence, but I'm going to use this to create an accomplishment sentence to put on my resume, maybe. I'm definitely going to use it to create an accomplishment sentence. Whether I use it on my resume or not depends. I may use different ones for my resume. But I'll also use it in a job interview when somebody says to me, tell me a time when you had to improvise because you were in a crisis situation. And then maybe I would choose this example. So doing this work might take some time and energy, but it's going to get you a lot of really good content that you can use to sell yourself, both on your resume and in your interviews. Here's another elaboration. My boss wanted a logo that lined up with our brand image of bold, fearless action. Instead of using colors I happen to like, I looked online for several examples, chose bright, solid colors, and when presenting my ideas to my boss, I included an explanation for my choice of colors. My boss was impressed and felt much more confident about the ideas I shared than others on the table, ultimately choosing one of my designs. So here are two examples of how you might take your proudest moments and put them into PAR format, problem, action, result, or STAR format, situation, action, result. It doesn't really matter, but in STAR format, it just opens it up a little bit more. It doesn't have to be a problem. It can also be a goal. Okay, so now we're going to actually get to your resume, to the work history section of your resume. The example I have here includes not too much. It includes the name of the company, and then I have underneath that a description of the company. Now, why do I have a description of the company? The reason is because people might not know a lot about the company that you work for, and what you put in the description of the company could impress them. If you work for an impressive company, you become impressive just by virtue of your connection. The thinking is, if a big impressive company like that, or maybe not even a big impressive company, if a small innovative company like that chose this person to work for them, then this person must have something valuable to choose, to make them choose-worthy, right? Because these bigger companies, people assume that they have very stringent selection processes. Then you put your job title. You can use either the years alone or the month and year that you worked there, but you want to put the date that you had that job. So for Pacific Care, maybe I have 3 jobs at Pacific Care. Maybe I moved around. You can put all 3 there. Again, you're going to be making a lot of these decisions based on the job that you're targeting. So if this particular job or the work at this company is very relevant to the job that you're targeting, you'll want to break it out into all the different jobs you had and have something like 9 accomplishment statements here. But then if you're applying to a job that has nothing to do with health, maybe you'll just keep it to this. Keep it to your most recent job title and just a few bullets, and maybe you'll expand on something else, some other experience that's more relevant to the job that you're targeting. So you have to make a lot of these decisions based on the job that you're targeting. But again, here's the example that we're using of how to put work history on your resume. So you put the title of the company that you worked for, a description of that company, your job title, the dates. Those are all really important. And then you tend to put 3 bullets underneath. Each of the bullets fit in accomplishment statement format, which is did X resulting in Y. I'll read these to you. Managed creation of data warehouse, enabling sales to identify trends in patient care data. So this person didn't have actual numbers, but they said this was my problem, or this is what I did, right, my action, and this is the result that it had. Again, developed an application, that's my action, that provided greater visibility into corporate budget allocations. That's the result. Managed interdisciplinary development team, that's the action. Ensuring efficient communication and effective support of user needs, that's the result. So that's your sentence format, did X resulting in Y. Sometimes it does make sense to put one responsibility statement in there. The case where that's important is if your job title isn't a typical job title and it doesn't make it obvious what you were responsible for. So in that case, you might want to use your first bullet to summarize what you were responsible for. If you have a very, very interesting job title like Manager of Sunshine or something like that. Some companies have very creative job titles, but things like Program Manager, Marketing Director, VP of Systems, most people are going to have a lot of assumptions about that type of job, especially if they're hiring for one. Okay, so this is our section on work history. You may want to play it a few times as you're going through the process of gathering and putting your work history into your resume. Again, you'll be making changes. You may have several versions of your resume based on the jobs that you're targeting, but you don't have to put representation of every single thing you've done into your resume. So keep that in mind, and don't clutter up your resume with too much. Less is more in this case. So that wraps up our work history section. In our next video, we'll go over the next final sections on your resume.